Are live. Joining me today is an extra special guest, Kenneth Williford. Ken, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do for those who might not know you?
So I'm a professor at the University of Texas at Arlington in the Department of Philosophy and Humanities, and I work on phenomenology and philosophy of mind and history of modern philosophy. And I've been working on consciousness, and self-consciousness pretty directly since well, that's what my dissertation was on back in 2003.
Oh,
Um, and I've kind of been an advocate of self-representationalism for some time, which kind of morphed into self-acquaintance theory.
hmm,
Um, and then that's been hitched up to what we call the projective consciousness model. And so that's still sort of an ongoing project to relate our work on the project. That's with David Rudolph and other collaborators to sort of relate those two projects. But what really has always driven me about consciousness was really the same intuitions that are behind higher order thought theory, but
hmm.
kind of taking it in a like the self-representationalist and then self-acquaintance way of thinking about it.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, so I hadn't realized that you said you had defended your dissertation or PhD in 2003.
Yeah.
Okay, where was that at? Do you mind if I
That was
ask?
at the University of Iowa.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, back in the day. Yeah.
Back in the day. Well, yeah, 2003. That's right when I was starting at CUNY. Oh, those mini.
God, yeah, it's like 20 something years ago, right?
Yeah, I
22.
know. It's
Yeah.
it's a real sad state of affairs when you look around the room and all of a sudden you're like, wait, we're the senior
Yeah,
figures. All of a
yeah,
sudden.
we're becoming the
Oh no, how did that happen? Okay. Oh, very cool. And so you've been at this for quite a long time, and as you've said, taking this kind of self-representational approach. But
initial. Yeah.
sort of start initially.
Well, I mean, so at a certain point, I kind of came to the conclusion that I really think representation is the wrong sort of category.
Oh, right. That's why self-acquaintance. Aha.
Yeah.
That's what the
But
initially was about.
early on, I was a little bit, you know, unclear in my own head about it.
Hmm.
I co-edited this book with Uriah Kriegel, Self-Representational Approaches to Consciousness. And in
Right.
that, my paper in there, I was definitely saying things that only made sense if you thought of it as a representational.
Right.
Um, but the actual model I developed in there using kind of hypersets, which
Hmm.
are sets that are in their own self-membership chains to sort of just model the structure of it. At some point, I realized, well, it's kind of neutral. You could think of it as representation. You could think of it as acquaintance. And then I was kind of driven away from thinking of it as representational by, those kind of objections to higher order thought theory, like the non-existent lower order thought problem and the
Right.
that does the higher order or the lower order thought carry the day when it comes to the phenomenal character of the so I kind of thought, well, maybe and all yeah, I kind of that kind of drove me in the direction of acquaintance. Yeah.
Hmm.
Um
Interesting. So before I ask about your version of this, are you familiar with the kind of higher order acquaintance view that you get from Benj Hiley? Have you seen that kind of
oh,
view?
uh so I know vaguely about his work and could you say something about it?
Yeah.
Um
I think maybe it's not exactly the same kind of view, but the basic idea is that he wants to compare two kinds of higher order approaches. One, which is kind of an intentionalist approach,
yeah.
which he thinks gets the picture backwards in some sense. Not that I agree with him, but still, this is the kind of picture. And the other, which starts with this kind of higher order acquaintance view,
Yeah.
where you are kind of more directly acquainted with the first
Yeah.
order quality in some way. And that sounds more of like the style that you're doing. But there's an extra special loopiness that you want to
That's
add to
right.
the equation somewhere, which is, I guess, what distinguishes it. That's what I was going to ask, basically. But if you're not familiar with the view, that's fine. I don't want to belabor the
No,
point.
I see. I wasn't. Uh, I mean, I have thought about a view like that, but I'm not like I know of his work, but I haven't like engaged with it
Uh huh. That's
carefully.
fine. But
But yeah, that so it is that, except it's acquaintance, but it's not like one state being acquainted with another, but it's self-acquaintance. You know,
so
acquainted
why?
with.
So that was basically what I wanted to ask, whether we like Benj's view or not. It's a cool paper and a good view, and I do think it should be talked about. So not that we need to talk about it, but still, someone should. But if you like that, why would we opt for the self-representational view over that kind of acquaintance view? So what I'm asking is, even if you liked acquaintance, why self-acquaintance, which seems like
Yeah.
a real heavy kind of burden?
Oh, no, it's not a burden.
No. Oh wait. I mean, a
It's
challenge, an
it's it's uh
opportunity.
it's freedom, my friend.
Free.
Free. No, well, the main reason for me is phenomenological.
Uh-huh.
You may recall that, like in one of his early papers on higher order thought, David Rosenthal says, there seems to be an intuition that consciousness is aware of itself or acquainted with itself. He doesn't use the word acquainted, but and then he goes on to say, well, but it can't be like that. It's got to be this relation between two states, or you know,
Yeah.
um, and so the thought is like, well, yeah, we kind of have this intuition, but it's not accurate. It's kind of an illusion. And people who have thought that have often have thought that it's people have the intuition, but it's an illusion, have um, generally adduced like, so for example, Gilbert Ryle
Mm-hmm.
has a discussion of it in this chapter called Self-Intimation in uh, in the what is
Sounds
it?
bad. Self-intimation.
Gilbert Ryle's well, his famous book on
Yeah, and the
my
nature of tomatoes.
my early on
Perception.
my early onset dementia is kicking in right now. But Gilbert Ryle's famous book about the mind, the
Oh, you're trying to remember
concept of
Riles. Oh, I thought you were talking
concept
about
of
something
mind.
else.
The concept of mind is
Yeah,
that?
the concept of mind. Uh huh.
Yeah, the
What are you
famous.
tricking me? You're trying to gaslight me.
I'm gaslighting. Anyway, so Gilbert Ryle. So what's interesting is, like, if you look at it historically, like probably every phenomenologist to a person held this view about consciousness, that it's acquainted or directly aware of itself,
Hmm.
and that this isn't two states, but this is a kind of reflexivity.
So that it's a
Um,
phenomenological datum that this is
yes,
that
that
this.
it's a datum.
Yeah. Uh
Yeah.
huh.
Tons of philosophers in the history of philosophy thought this too, in one form or another, including Descartes, including Arnaud, including John Locke, although Locke's view is actually subject to interpretation. And Aristotle had this view, and a lot of Buddhist philosophers had this view. In fact, the Buddhists split on it because some said no, it can't be like that, and others said no, it is like that.
Mm-hmm.
Indian philosophers, we can, in um, they actually split on it too.
Exactly.
Uh,
It's surprising you find this
but
split in almost every tradition that I've looked at.
yeah, so I guess I'm on the side of those who take it to be a real datum and not an illusion. And I guess you could say the novel, or what I kind of take to be my contribution here, is to show that the typical regress arguments deployed against this view do not work,
Mm-hmm.
and to show that sort of formally.
So that's
That
the non-well-founded sets. I mean, you were doing it in a different way in your earlier work, but I think this is the way you're thinking about it currently.
Yeah, I mean, at least that is a tool for showing you that you can formally spell out what the structure is without it entailing a regress.
Mm-hmm. So
Um,
you want
yeah.
to say what a non-well-founded set is, or do we need to not go? I mean, it's up to you whether you want to talk about that in any
Yeah,
level
we
of
can.
detail.
I mean, basically, I mean, in general, a non-well-founded set is a set. This is where can get misleading. An infinitely descending membership chain.
Uh-huh.
But um, that can include cyclic membership chains. So the idea is you say have a set, and then you take its members and the members of the members and
The
the members.
power set.
Not the power set. So
Okay.
it's not the power set. It's the think of it as what's sometimes called the transitive closure of the set.
Okay.
So you have a set that contains sets, and so on, down to the if you have basic elements that don't elements are called that don't have members, you would go down to those. But just think of it, the members of the members of the members of the members, all right? If you have a cyclic membership chain, it means somewhere in there you're going to encounter the initial set.
It's going to be a member of itself.
It's going to be either a member of itself or a member of a member of itself or a member of a member of a member of itself and so on, right? One of those, right? But these are finite sets. So even though if you kept do the kind of take the member of operation, take the members of, you could just go on, but it would go in a cycle if you did that.
Right.
So the sets themselves are finite entities if you allow self-membership. In standard set theory, self-membership and being in your own membership chain is prohibited by the foundation axiom, or the axiom of foundation. But it's been demonstrated that you can get rid of that axiom and have an axiom that allows for such sets, and that if the one is consistent, so is the other.
Okay. And you like consistency. I think I'm going to have to get on you about this later because I do wonder about this. But
about consistency? About
yeah. But
should we care about it?
or whether we should, what kind of non-classical logic you might want to adopt in the face of some of these issues we're discussing.
Yeah.
Because I think you have some aversions to the right view.
You mean, so are you do you like dialetheism and?
Oh yeah, I like all the truth values.
Well, if you go that route, then a fortiori, I'm okay with these entities.
Yeah, exactly. I just think then it depends on what kind of arguments you have for or against the views. But one question that I had when I was thinking about your idea, which I think is an interesting and important contribution, to say, look, here's a formal apparatus which allows us to capture the thing that we're saying in a way that makes sense of it, so it's not, you can say it's wrong, but you can't say it's you can't make sense of it.
Right.
And a lot of people do try to say that, or they say it's somehow leads to a contradiction, or which is how they don't make sense of it. So I do think that that's important. But one question that I have, and I was curious to hear what you might say about, was whether this non-well-founded set theory, this kind of circularity of membership, captures the notion of awareness, so it may capture something structurally about it, but does it capture what the thing we're trying to talk about when we talk about this kind of self-awareness? Because it does seem to me that you might have other things that might have formally that structure that aren't this.
This is I was just talking about this with a guy named Johannes Kleiner.
Oh, I know Johannes. Of course, yes, I know Johannes.
Yeah. Because he so in my 2006 paper on this that's in that book with that Uriah and I co-edited, I actually say there well, I mean, is this the only thing that has this structure? And I'm if you look at, and I say, well, if you look at the kind of the Bible of this whole view, it's called a book called Vicious Circles by John Barwise and Lawrence Moss. They have tons and tons of examples of all kinds of things, from computer science, from logic, from study of paradoxes, and so on, where you get this kind of cyclic or non-well-founded structure. You can use those sets to model them. Even something as simple as a cycle, like the days of the week, where you just repeat, right? You can, if you kind of model it synchronically, you can say what is a week? A week is
does Sunday include Saturday and Monday?
Saturday, Sunday, a week, and then it's okay, so it's just. And so you might think, or feedback loops you can do. So you might think, you can use this formal model to describe those things, but do they really have this structure? So Johannes is inclined to say that we should say that only consciousness really has this structure, and everything else that we can describe with it, with non-well-founded set there, is just we're just kind of using it as a façon de parler,
Like original and derived intentionality in
a
a
bit
way.
like that, I suppose. Yeah,
Yeah.
but for me, I'm kind of like, well, I'm not sure that I can have a good argument for that. So for me, it's like, well, it's still a contribution if, or still significant if it turns out that it is in fact a structure of consciousness, even if it doesn't tell you the entire structure of consciousness. And so I'm kind of inclined to think that maybe if you sort of like, what is the entire structure of consciousness? It may be kind of big and messy. So like imagine that all these different like approaches to the elephant, like IIT and higher order thought and global workspace theory, and imagine that they all actually are getting at something that's like a part of consciousness, and that the final view is some kind of like combination of all of these things. And there are people who like say things along these lines.
Right.
And well, then it would mean that, like, if you sort of thought of it mathematically or structurally, it's actually like this big kind of complex structure, which wouldn't actually be that surprising. So if you want to say, what is the thing that uniquely has this structure? Okay, that's conscious, and this thing is like complex and like messy enough that we would go, yeah, nothing else has that.
Yeah. So yeah, this is your. Are you like contrasting the master key idea versus the kind of patchwork?
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, yeah.
because it sounds like what you're saying is that we might be in a position where instead of looking for the correct theory of consciousness, which is the way I tend to pitch things, we want to arbitrate between these theories. But one possibility is that they get combined in some way into this like melting pot. And people like Michael Graziano have argued for one way that might look, and maybe David Rosenthal has a different way that might look, and so forth and so on. And you're saying here's a third or another a way that things might look from a different point of view, emphasizing self-consciousness and projective geometry, but really making sense of all of these other theories. Or it could just be that, no, it's just one part of it, and IIT does one part of it. So it could kind of be either, you could be on either side of that fence.
Yeah. So the issue is like, is there some master theory from which you can derive all of the other properties?
Right.
Or is it more like, no, there are just these independent properties that when they get, stitched together, that's what consciousness is.
Yeah. Because like for example, when I think about IIT, I think to myself, well, gee, it seems, I'm on the side of the fence like people like Ned Block who think it looks like it's more a theory of intelligence. It looks like a theory of like content, of how content is put into a usable format so you can, guide yourself around, but not necessarily. And those things could happen unconsciously, you might think. So it looks like not really a theory of consciousness, in my opinion. Right. And you're saying, but maybe it is.
Well, no, I'm saying maybe I agree. It's not a theory of consciousness in the sense that like that's the essence of consciousness, and what is. Oh,
I see. I was misunderstanding.
Like what is not Tononi, but Koch call it the central identity.
Yeah, exactly.
So, we have this paper very critical with Björn Merker and David Rudrow, very critical of IIT.
But not so critical as the sign certain letters, one assumes.
Right. Well, I wasn't asked to sign the letter. I wouldn't have, because I kind of think like it's too early. I'm kind of like Feyerabendian enough about the philosophy of science to be like, we don't really have a demarcation criterion, and like what's science, what's pseudoscience, and astrology could have turned out to be scientific,
I actually spent some time trying to figure out how it could. When I was younger, I I had all sorts of theories about how like the moon's gravity might affect like neurotransmitters in the brain, so that you have certain ratios at certain times. And I had like I was like, I don't know. Once I
Well,
found out that all that stuff about full moons meaning more like insane people was like a myth, I was like, there goes my theory. But
there goes the whole thing. So, but it's like you can't rule it out a priori, right? So,
exactly, yeah.
so, and certainly in the early stage of a science, like it's a little early to be calling people pseudoscientists versus
Yeah.
just doing the standard thing, which is,
But
oh,
I
you've got,
think that I mean, I didn't sign the letter either, even though they did ask me. But I think part of the complaint, which I do understand where the complaint is coming from, to be honest, part of the complaint comes with the way that it's often advertised as like the only like serious theory, or like the one
yeah,
that's like the most respectable. It's like a lot of people are
yeah,
very, very suspicious about it, and it's been sensationalized, and some of the
yeah,
evidence that's presented for it isn't really strong evidence for
yeah.
it.
No, I agree with all that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, and that's hard not to. I mean, I signed all sorts of things that say that, uh, but
yeah.
nonetheless, so I was wondering what you were saying just a second ago. If you were saying, well, IITs could be a good theory
Well,
of some aspect of
yeah,
consciousness, or
could be.
some aspect of mental functioning that's
I mean,
independent of consciousness.
right, well, or that consciousness presupposes. So, like, I mean, if you think I kind of read IIT as, at least in terms of how it might relate to consciousness, as a theory of the synchronic unity of consciousness,
Uh
where
huh.
you have like a lot of different modalities and a lot of
Does
different
synchronic mean at a time or across a
at a
time? Which
time.
okay, I
Yeah,
always get these
yeah.
confused.
Like, you have consciousness involves, a articulated
Uh huh.
phenomenal manifold that has different, stitched together, put together, different quality types and so on, you know.
Okay.
Um, so
So
we
you
need
think
some
it could be
theory.
like, sorry to interrupt you, but so it sounds like what you're saying is, it could almost be thought of as like as an opponent to like quality space theories, as competing for that same kind of what they're
Well,
theoretical theories
e
of.
e even if you've got like a quality space theory, you still have the fact that like you you look over and you see something and you can also feel it and you can hear it and that like the binding, you
Right.
know. So even if you've got like
How all those qualities get bound.
you need some way to put everything together,
Hmm.
basically. So some kind of unity of consciousness where we're talking about the stitching together, the not stitch, the integrating, to use their word, of all the different kinds of qualities that you might
So then,
experience.
how would you spin this from your point of view? Would you say, look, well, you could take the mathematics of IIT and then append non-well-founded set theory to it, and then you get the right view, or the more towards the correct view? Is that basically the
Yeah,
idea?
so that's just I mean, I don't know that this is true, but
Uh
that's
huh.
sort of just the thought. So there's
Yeah.
sort of like the hegemonic view of a theory of consciousness, which is like we have from this theory, we're going to be able to derive everything
Yes.
else
I
about
represent the hegemony.
right. And then there's the view that like no, they're just independent features
Yeah.
that different theories are getting at, and it may turn out that some of them are not independent and they're derivable from some other, like for example in our paper on projective geometry and pre-reflective self-consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
we try anyway to at least I'll put it in a more like continental sort of way. We explore the, the possibility that projective geometry could make sense of what I had been using non-well-foundedness to capture in other work. Yeah, I
Uh
think the
huh.
jury's still out on that, but um,
And that would be what, the idea that the origin point's outside of the projective space, or like which aspect of it
it's
is.
a projective space has there are a couple of aspects of a projective space just as like a mathematical object.
Mm-hmm.
One is what's called reciprocity, which is like kind of to talk kind of like a mathematician in a way, a bad mathematician. Arrows going this way also go this way. So it's as if like
Uh huh.
you're any kind of direction of aiming at something also like aims back just in the virtue of the structure of the space.
Okay.
And then another is in this one, our mathematician Daniel Benkin, our collaborator, didn't like this idea so much, but it's still David Rudolph thought there might be something to it. There's also the gluing of antipodal points in a projective space, which means that like you have these kind of, you can think of them as like geodesics, like lines come back to their origin point,
Uh-huh.
right? So there's a kind of circularity built into
Into the
the
projective
space.
space itself.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. And then
That's
so then you don't need the non-well-founded set
then you
theory.
wouldn't need the non well-foundedness. Yeah. Or non well-foundedness would be a way of sort of another way of describing this feature, but the projective geometry, the thought would be the projective geometry model
Uh-huh.
gives you the deeper understanding of what that
Okay.
property
Yeah.
is. And that non
Interesting.
well-foundedness is just kind of like a sketchy way of or a way of sketching that property that doesn't tell you anything too deep. I mean, it's something analogous to be said. Like if you're going to use sets to model episodes of consciousness, and you like put the contents as elements,
Mm-hmm.
whether ordered or not, and you say, "Oh yeah, here's what's doing the function of unity here? Oh, just the membership relation." Well, it doesn't tell you like concretely what really happens, like what grounds the unity of consciousness or what explains it. It's just a sort of way of describing it.
Yeah.
Like
I mean,
so,
so you might wonder whether that mathematical approach is even the right one. I mean, this is,
yeah, you're
I
right.
mean, this is maybe a place where we disagree because I'm going to say, well, representation can do that. So, you represent them as a unity. That's how they get unified.
Yeah,
So it doesn't really seem as mysterious from like if you endorse like a representational point of view. But
yeah,
it is like, so it's a problem that's sort of presenting itself, I think, from a certain point of view that isn't there on the other side.
yeah. But then you've got like other issues to deal with representation. Like you kind of to have the full explanation, you would need like some theory of representation that
Yeah.
you know, some presumably some naturalistic one. For that's kind of another source of my like skepticism about representation is I'm kind of like in despair about all naturalistic theories of representation, and
What? What? Why?
I don't want to turn into John Searle, but for
Oh no.
for
Yeah, for
many
many
reasons.
many reasons. Okay, good save. Good save, bro.
But just talking about intentionality, I mean, sometimes I'm like, God, maybe John Searle's right about intentionality, and like we're
Oh
all
no, and he was wrong in so many ways. So I'm scared to ask in what way you think he might have been right.
well, it's just out of despair because it's like I feel like uh, you know causal covariation theories are not adequate,
Uh-huh.
and
What about
information
teleosemantics?
teleosemantics is not adequate.
Uh-huh. For what reason?
Um, I think that it has trouble. So, well, one big reason. So here's okay. There's like a couple of things. So people often forget that in Millikan's work, if we talk about Millikan's version of teleosemantics
That's one.
itself, she had the idea that really intentionality is some kind of homeomorphism or topological equivalence between the representation and the represented,
Yeah.
right? And that there all these homeomorphisms might just be out there, and then what the teleo, the evolutionary story does is it picks out the right one. And then we sort of define the right one. So it means actually that there's all kinds of representation going on all over the place.
Uh-huh.
Um, and it's just that you know, the teleological story, evolutionary teleological story, selects the right one, the one. And what makes it the right one? Well, it plays the role in the selection of and the evolutionary success of the bees or whatever. It's the bee dance and
Right.
so.
B Dan's got to do it. But so what's the problem with that? What's
Well,
going on
the
here?
problem is that
So you're
intentionality is
just
just
describing the view and saying, see?
yeah. That's because I think like just similarity, even like topological equivalent,
Well, it's
not
that the similarity
intentionality.
was fought against other similarities and
Yes.
won because it served a certain purpose. So yeah, just that.
Yeah, that's not intentionality.
But why not? But what? I mean, okay.
Because
What is
similarity, I guess,
intentionality then?
because I think it ultimately it reduces to a view that similarity is intentionality, and that is not true. Intentionality has a kind of asymmetry to it that similarity does not.
Well, it's not similarity because it could really be anything that gets picked to play this role by the system.
Yeah, I mean that's how you. But then all of that is just like so. Millikan herself would say, yeah, well, the intentionality is this similarity, but then like the teleo semantic part is like this sort of apparatus
Yeah.
evolutionary apparatus that picks
Which is
out
what
that.
gives it the content. That's where the content comes from.
Yeah,
So that's in a way what the content. I mean, yeah.
yeah.
So I guess if you're dissatisfied with those kind of views, which some people are, as you're saying, but
Well, yeah.
yeah,
I
I'm not
mean,
sure. That's how seems how brains work. Brains seem cool, and they do seem to represent the environment. Or do you not think that about brains? I do wonder, like, how far you're anti-representationalism. Are you like an activist about the brain, or like?
no,
No, okay, I didn't mean to scare you. Sorry about that.
no.
Okay, so then what are
Um,
we talking about? So the brain can represent, but it's like not what is really important for consciousness. That's the view.
um,
That is a non-representational thing that's important for consciousness.
yeah, I think that because I think that look, to a certain extent, it sort of depends on like what you're building into your notion of representation.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think, for example, that what's characteristic of representation, that its object might not exist, then I think that's inappropriate for thinking about self-awareness, fundamental pre-reflective self-consciousness.
Yeah, but why?
Um, well, it just I would just stare at people incredulously
If what?
if they if they tell me that yeah I could like seem to myself to exist, but not really.
Uh-huh.
That like so this kind you could
You
be if
mean
you're
if you could be wrong about think you exist when you don't, like the Descartes thing? Is this what we're talking about?
yeah, but it's not so I'm unsatisfied like a self-representationalist can say this too, can
Uh-huh.
say oh well yeah because obviously the token or whatever the subsystem that represents itself if it really does then of course it exists because right
Yeah. And it can
so it
represent
can't be
itself
wrong.
as not having any representations or having any states and not existing. That's what
Yeah,
representations
that's
can do
thinking
is
about it.
represent you as not existing when in fact you do.
Yes, it happened to a friend of mine once.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
he wasn't even like turning it into a philosophical view. Like illusionism. It was like,
Exactly. But
but
so why isn't that good enough to account for the kind of thing that you're saying? It's that these things that seem
because that
strange.
because to my way of thinking, that's a matter of thought, and consciousness is not thought.
Well, I agree
It's
with
more
that.
like it's more like direct perception.
But why can't direct perception be representational? And
Yeah, you could. That's what I was about to say. You could call it that, and maybe we're just like disagreeing about um, how we're going to use certain terms.
yeah.
So for me, I kind of like to make the distinction between representation and acquaintance as kind of the old Russellian way, like a representation, its object might or might not exist, right, across the board.
Hmm.
Um, with acquaintance, its object, if there is really a state of acquaintance, it's a real relation. So I tend to think like, now representation is not a real relation
Yeah,
because
it's
we can represent
representational.
non-existent objects. We do it all the time whenever we have anxiety, right? And as
Well,
the
some of us
essentially,
causal theorists, teleological people might say you don't actually, but I
yeah,
mean,
you can say that, but that's
we
like,
could table that. But I actually do think it's a big open question whether you really successfully think about non-existent objects, which on a Kripkean kind of Millikan view, you probably don't.
I see. For me, that kind of um, claim is just self-contradictory because you've just said like, yeah, you're all wrong about that.
Yeah,
So
but
that doesn't obtain. So that state of affairs doesn't exist.
exactly. But that's an existentially
So
quantified statement, not one that picks out an object that doesn't exist.
yeah, I mean, if you put it, do you mean like putting it in terms of like de re sort of construal versus de
Yeah,
dicto?
yeah.
Yeah, and so you don't have non. Yeah, but to me, it's like, one of my teachers was a philosopher named Panayot Buchvarov, who he probably has the most sophisticated defense of Meinongianism in the literature. Um,
Okay.
so I kind of have like,
You're kind of a Meinongian.
although another one of my teachers was Gregory Landini. You probably met him at one point. He's the anti-Meinong. He's as Russellian as you could be. So I have this kind of like
Tug of
schizophrenia
war. Okay, I see.
about it. But so I kind of think even if you go like the fully like Russellian route, this problem crops up once again. Because you can certainly think about what is not or what is not the case.
Hmm.
Um, and it seems to me like just
Anytime someone says certainly, you kind of know they lost already.
if they say you can certainly. Well, you just, you did it again. You just said maybe you're wrong, which is like to think about something that's not the case, if, or at least possibly not the case.
Yeah, I think you can think about things that are not the case. I don't think you can think about things that don't exist.
Oh yeah, to me that like there's not really a good distinction to draw there because the one um, is implicitly the thought about the other because it's a thought that a certain fact does not obtain or a certain state of affairs does not obtain.
It's a thought that a certain sentence is false.
Yeah, and what makes it false? That a certain state of affairs does not obtain. That is
I
that
mean,
that's
you don't need to do metaphysics to just know that a sentence is false. I know that's not a unicorn over there, but I don't think that I'm thinking of a unicorn as opposed to rather having an existentially quantified statement about a horned horse, which is correctly false because that's not a horned horse over there. But that's not a non-existent object. That's
yeah,
just
I guess like
description.
if you think there if you have a truth maker theory of truth, then you might be sympathetic to what I'm saying. Like, oh, so you're saying a certain fact doesn't obtain, that a certain fact doesn't exist or isn't real. Yeah. And so then it comes down to and then if you think of facts as in a way like individuals, like objects,
Uh huh.
then
That's a
you're,
lot of ifs.
yeah, but I mean, that's where we dwell, isn't
Yeah,
it?
but I'm just saying, like, you don't have to walk that tightrope to the conclusion you're leading me to because there are many off routes.
Well, how did we get onto this anyway? So I guess I was
Because
saying that,
talking about intentionality,
yeah.
and I do think that you were suggesting that if as soon as you admit that you can think of non-existent objects or have that's a kind of problem for certain views, and I was suggesting no, certain views
I
deny
guess
that actually.
what I was wanting to say was because this goes back to what you said about representation, and what I was trying to actually to be ecumenical or
Oh.
what's irenic here. And I was trying to say that, like, well, depending on what you mean by representation, we might not actually
I
disagree.
see. Uh huh.
Because you might think that what I think of as acquaintance is really just a kind of representation, but it's that kind of representation that does involve a real relation versus, thinking of Santa or construed in a Meinongian way. So my tendency to think that representation isn't a real relation is probably from, Meinongian influence. Like, yeah, I
Yeah.
can think about Santa, but Santa doesn't exist, so I can't really relate to Santa in a real way. Um, so whatever the analysis of that representation is, it can't involve Santa
Right.
existing.
Yeah, exactly. No,
And
that
if you're
much we
and
agree
of
on.
course, if you are a Meinongian, you go, yeah, it involves non-existent Santa.
Yeah, no, we don't want that. But
Yeah.
but yes, because I just don't know what else there is besides representation, because this thing you're calling
Okay.
acquaintance seems very mysterious, and people
Well,
talk
let's see.
about it a lot, but like when you actually ask them to talk about what it is
About what with about what
they say
about
things that sound like we can represent things that way. So then it's like we get back to a stalemate.
well, if you I guess what I'm saying is if you're willing to say that the kind of representation that goes on in basic self, suppose you agree for the moment that we have some kind of basic self-awareness,
Yeah.
that the kind of represent and that it is phenomenal, right?
I would agree to both of those things, by
Okay,
the way. I
so
know not
then you might,
everyone does, but I do.
yeah, not everyone does,
Yeah.
right? Um, if you think, well, we can, what's going on in those cases is not like thinking about Santa. It's something like it is relational in some way,
Uh-huh.
and it's phenomenal.
But
So
it
if you're
is like thinking about Santa. Whatever's how is it not like that?
because thinking, I mean, so this interesting because it goes back to like those old debates, which are actually much older than Bill Lycan and David Armstrong and so on.
Yeah.
I mean, higher order thought and higher order perception models.
Old school. Yeah.
Yeah, because part kind of like that actually that debate, you can actually find discussions of that in Kant, believe it or not. It's kind of interesting, but
Well, I've had con scholars tell me they wish we'd stop saying that, but
really,
yeah.
well,
But I don't know. Other con scholars may say otherwise, so who knows? I think it's a mess when you look back in the literature. But anyway,
well, we
Kant does speak in ways that suggest this interpretation. I agree.
yeah, that there is this kind of issue floating around. Like, is it a matter of thought?
Yeah.
Is it a matter, is it more like perception? So is our basic awareness more like thought, or is it more like perception? And of course, then there are people who think that, well, perception itself is just a kind of a thought.
Right.
So those are all kind of, debates that I don't think they're easy to resolve. Uh,
But I'm just asking, what are the
but
options, not to
my
resolve
ten
them.
my
Like,
tendency is to think, okay, thought, to be sort of like, look, what is thought, right? Conceptual thought, whenever you think about something, you don't have a phenomenal experience of the thing that you're thinking about. You can if you can kind of simulate it if you imagine it, but that's thought. Thought is like, can be totally abstract. It doesn't, I can talk about and think about the Eiffel Tower even without having to imagine it, but I can imagine or remember it. Um, whereas perception involves a kind of content that is over and above just the conceptual thought involved, conceptual content involved in thought. Right?
I agree. I think this is the problem with higher order thought theories, and why one of the many problems I think with higher order thought theories, and why I, in my own work, call my view a higher order representational view, because I'm not trucking in thoughts.
Okay.
So I agree with what you're saying, but thoughts are
Okay.
just one kind of representation. Perceptions may be another kind of representation.
Maybe. Yeah.
But so I don't think that just distinguishing them in that way should lead us to think otherwise. But I thought that, because what I'm really trying to challenge, or not challenge, but try to understand, is what acquaintance is,
Ah,
in such a way that it could be different than representation.
yeah.
And one thing you said was representations always allow for misrepresentation, basically, but
Hmm.
acquaintance doesn't.
Hmm.
And there, I just wonder, like, what you think about, like, for example, somatoparaphrenia, where
Hmm.
people have all sorts of strange body experiences. One very particular case of a woman saying that her arm wasn't her arm, but in fact was her niece's arm. And if you said, I'm going to touch your arm, and touch her arm, she says, I don't feel anything. But if you say, I'm gonna touch your niece's arm and then touch her arm, she feels it, she says, or at least. So
Yeah.
how do you, like, this to me looks like this looks like a case where you're like, how do you explain what's going on here in an
Okay.
acquaintance kind of way that keeps all of this stuff track? It gets very complicated. So
That's
I don't
good.
know. What do you think about these kind of empirical cases?
Okay, so I have my sort of view about the nature of perceptual intentionality is a two component view or two layer view. There's the acquaintance layer that is strictly speaking non-conceptual but conceptualizable, and then there is the representational layer where the classic cases of misperception or thinking it's one thing and then going, no, it's not, it's something else. That's the kind of thing I have in mind here, where the intentional, to use a Husserl's word, animation of this,
Why would you sully this nice conversation?
because it's kind of a nice word when you get used to it. It's like
Oh
you're gonna
God,
you're gonna
no.
see it as. He just means like seeing
I
as.
know when
But,
there's such an easier way to say things and you make up something like that is really annoying. But
well, I didn't
okay.
say it in German.
Yeah, that would have been truly annoying. Exactly.
Zayden.
But you just did. Come on. Oh, you Husserlians or whatever you are.
Anyway, but think of it. Okay, they're seeing and they're seeing as. If I can use the old like.
Yeah, I
But
understand the
yeah,
distinction.
you get the idea, right? So it's like
Some people think all seeing is seeing as.
I know,
Yeah. Okay.
and I think they're wrong. So it's just,
Oh, okay.
so I think there's
So you're advocating for the given here. That's what is this what's
oh,
happening?
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, there is no myth. The myth, the given is no myth.
Given is no myth.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
wait a minute. So is this a kind of pan qualityism in the end here? Like what exactly is given?
Well, what
Like is
you
it a
mean?
panpsychism pan? Like where are we? What
No,
pan?
for
What thing is
heavens
pan
no.
here? On your view,
Heavens
something's
no.
got to be right. I'm waiting for the
I
pan,
mean, like
the pan surprise.
I'm resisting all these temptations to become a panpsychist because to me that's I should just go into administration at that point, as somebody said.
Okay, but there are temptations.
Not really.
Okay.
To be a panpsychist, I'm not let's say not serious temptations
I
because
see.
I just find it like
But
because
the thing
I
you're describing is like very not physically acceptably understandable. Like
no,
we
I
sort
don't
of
I don't I don't agree with that. I think it's no more and no less look, so we all have if we're conscious, we all have a phenomenology, right? And then
yes.
we're trying to like apply certain categories to it. Like, okay, is it perceptual? Is it representational? Is it acquaint? And these categories have some like logical structure to them, and then we kind of do like, okay, how do we fit this into the world? I think no matter what you say, we all have a kind of the same sort of issue. Like, how do we fit it into our what is the old Sellers thing? The manifest image
Manifest.
and the scientific image.
Yeah.
Like, how do we kind of fit it in there? And I don't think that acquaintance is any more difficult in that regard than any other kind of like phenomenal qualities or represent types of representation that end up being equivalent to phenomenality. I don't think there's any principal difference in terms of difficulty. So I don't think when people say, "Oh, but acquaintance is mysterious," I don't think it's any more mysterious than any other thing we're postulating.
Well, you think it's
Might
all
be
mysterious because you just
category.
rejected every account of representation that is like physically kosher.
Well, no, okay,
So it's
no,
like all these things, yeah, it's equally mysterious on your view. So that's what I'm talking about. Like,
okay.
if all of our best physicalistic theories are like not up to snuff on your view, then like,
About representation, yeah.
well, which is a crucial aspect
But look,
of this,
I agree.
and also acquaintance, by the way, because I don't see any physical. Anyway, so I'll let you finish. But anyway, that's what kind of where I'm heading with this.
Okay.
Is it's like, yeah, there's the
Well,
cliff.
that's good because so look, my way of like staving off the collapse into dualism or panpsychism or God forbid idealism.
These are some people love these things. In fact, you're gonna make
I
people
know.
mad over here.
I know they love them, but I'm like, come on,
And
man.
your view does kind of fit with it, wouldn't you say? Like naturally.
So basically, yeah, I mean, if you look at like sort of my stuff against like dualism and panpsychism and so on, or at least against the arguments for them,
Right.
they're basically I'm basically trying to have my phenomenological cake and still be a physicalist
Yes. And
or
I
a
love that. I
materialist.
love that as well. I'm also one of these people.
Yeah, okay. So, what I wanted to say, like the reason, a couple of things here. In addition to like everybody's intuition that, come on, my coffee cup is not conscious, and that's bonkers, right?
Well, that's not what every
But
panpsychist says.
I know, but you know that I'm saying in addition to this kind of like knee-jerk reaction to panpsychism,
Yeah.
that that it's just preposterous, right? Like, putting that common sort of thought aside, um, the it does mean that consciousness, unless you make it the very fabric of the cosmos and the kind of like source of all causal power in the
Hmm.
cosmos, it does seem to mean that consciousness doesn't really do anything too special
Right.
itself.
Yeah.
It's kind of, if not epiphenomenal, it's either like has all power or it has no power. Which
Okay.
seems to me like that those are bad extremes.
Uh-huh.
It seems to me that consciousness must be doing something for the organisms that have it and doing some doing some specific things.
So
So
this is
I'm
the part
kind
of
of,
IIT that you like because they also say it's got to have causal power and
well, no, I mean IIT, yeah, they do, but they also it's also way too non-specific.
right.
This is why I think that's what we argued in that BB what is it called? BBS
Uh-huh.
paper.
The brains of
About
behavioral science paper, that's what?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that it's like not it's not a function specific to consciousness. So this is why like the projective geometry stuff kind of allows you to spell out a specific function
Hmm.
when it's sort of connected up with decision making and perceptual judgment and so on. Gives
Well,
you
I
like,
want to eventually get to that, but I'm still hung up on this acquaintance business. So I know we will escape this eventually. Um,
well,
because I do wonder to what extent these things are separatable on your view. Like, could you have just a creature with just a like pre-reflective self-consciousness and no projective aspect, or are
well,
they bound together in some way metaphysically on your view?
I kind of think they are bound together in some way.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of I don't have a like I'm not dead yet, so like
You still got time. You still got
still
time.
thinking about this, but if the what we argued in that paper on pre-reflective self-consciousness and projective geometry is correct, then if consciousness is structured by a projective space, then it has this kind of reciprocity property that kind of fills the same role as pre-reflective self-consciousness, and it has these other functional features too if it gets put in. But it could just be in theory like devoid of much other content. I kind of think like at a
Hmm.
certain level there's going to be some content that just comes from embodiment. It comes from being a real concrete entity.
Hmm.
So even if you know you're whatever you achieve you never achieve pure consciousness. I don't care what those meditators say.
Um,
They never
I
get
mean,
all.
well, the phenomenal. If you see, this is one. This I'm glad that you said that because as someone who meditates, the
Yeah,
phenomenology of those experiences is pretty strong.
yeah,
And if you're taking phenomenology seriously,
yes,
then you have to care what those meditators say,
I
and
I,
you're
I do, but
basing
I'm
kind of like a central aspect of your argument on like it's there phenomenologically,
yeah, it is, yeah.
and then
I
it
mean,
could also be
look
gone
at
phenomenologically though.
look
So
at look at Metzinger's book, the elephant
and the
and the
blind, yeah, or
yeah,
whatever. Uh
because
huh.
self-awareness is one of those features that's very well attested. This basic self-awareness is well attested by meditators, so they're on our
But
side.
it can also go away, or seem to.
I don't know about that. I don't think so. I mean, certainly,
Okay.
and there was, Metzinger once said, well, this PCM thing can't be right because it's in, these types of meditation, or these states of meditation, you lose point of view.
Yeah.
But the projective space intrinsically doesn't have a point of view. It's just capable of
And there
realizing.
are some like, so it's not that, and yeah, exactly, it's that it's possible, but it's like there are some very like hallucinatory, trippy experiences where point of view gets very altered, or like
Uh,
tiling experiences in
yeah,
DMT and so forth.
yeah,
Um,
I think this can be accommodated by the projective geometry model.
um,
Yeah.
yeah.
But like I wasn't meaning to be like an asshole to
To who?
meditators. I mean, I've like
Oh,
done a
I
lot.
see. Yeah, hey man. No, I was just saying that
I've done
if
a
you're
lot
gonna say
myself.
that there's some thing about consciousness which is not true, but which some people have
Well,
what they think of as phenomenological evidence for,
oh
then
yeah,
one might wonder why we
but
should think what you take about consciousness to
yeah,
be
of course,
foundational true.
that's
Um,
true. This is why I think like there's a lot of debates about consciousness that we're just not going to settle by phenomenology
right, we
comparison.
need empirical means.
And
Yeah.
we're not going to settle it by thought experiments either.
Yeah,
So we
exactly.
need empirical means. I totally agree with you on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, we
Uh,
are in
but
agreement on that.
but I was just saying what I had tried was trying to say was that states of so-called pure consciousness
Hmm.
still have a certain concrete content to them, like
I
that
mean,
you.
I've heard people say that. I mean, I remember I talked to Evan Thompson once, and he told me of a guy who said that in a lucid dream state, he dissolved the dream, then there was pure white light of consciousness, and then that disappeared.
Yeah, but what I'm getting
So,
at
but
is
I don't think anything's what's left over after that is I don't know, but
some kind of sense of instantiation or realization, like being concrete.
it wasn't a point of view, and it wasn't like there could be a point of view. It was like the absence of all that. And maybe it was just like because the way I think of, so this is one of the other things I wanted to bring up. I know we're kind of meandering around, and as long as you
Yeah,
don't mind, I don't mind.
I don't know.
But one of the things I want to bring up is what do you mean by consciousness? Because like I mean what I normally take, I thought you to mean, which is phenomenal consciousness, that there's something that it's like for you. There's a point of view on the world.
Yeah,
So now you want to analyze this in terms of subjective and qualitative character. I like those terms as well. I use them in my analysis of these things. I say, though, subjective character is what's in common between all my conscious experiences, and qualitative character, what distinguishes them. So the experiences are for me. That's what's in common to them all. That I kind of have a sense of their mindness or meanness or whatever
sure.
that
Yeah.
way of putting things is. So now all of that stuff I take as kind of phenomenological. Um,
Sure. Yeah.
but why? So now it's an extra step to go from there to something about acquaintance versus representation. Um, are we in agreement up to there at least?
Yeah,
Okay.
totally.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So far we could just be describing the way things seem, but not the way they actually are.
Yeah. The only, the only well, let me just put it this way. I was kind of pushed toward the direction of acquaintance because I don't think that it's possible for the phenomenal manifold at some level to be merely an object of representation. What I mean by that is that it might not exist. So for any particular objects in that you animate, that you see as being this or that, that might not exist. But there's some manifold. So abstracting from all that content, the idea is just that consciousness is a relational matter at
Yeah.
some
But
level.
it may so this is where like I disagree with traditional high order theorists
Oh,
on my way of thinking of things because not that anyone cares, but I do have a book on this, which someday uh, it could be read by people, I suppose, but we'll never know, I guess. But anyway, it's there, and I do try to spell out these differences. And
no,
one of
no.
the key ones I think is kind of the thought behind what you're saying here, because I'm a representationalist, or at least I'm not one, but That's the view that I think is most plausible if you're going to have a theory of consciousness, which is a third question I was going to ask you, which is like, I don't really think you're interested in a theory of consciousness. Maybe that's why it's a model as opposed to a theory, but we'll get to
Oh,
that later.
oh,
But I'm
okay.
interested in like in a theory of consciousness. And I want
Yeah.
to like account for the phenomenological data, but I don't want to just give it a pass and be like, oh, so that like the way it seems is a direct route to the structure that must be there. But it seems
Yeah.
like the view that you take and the view that IIT take and what they have in common in a way is that they do that.
Yes,
Eh,
I agree with you.
Oh, you
Yeah.
do? Okay. And that seems like it's maybe bad.
See, I don't think it's bad, and this is why I kind of like illusionism to me seems like thinking this is bad
Mm,
on steroids, right?
okay. Well, like,
Because
what do you mean illusionism? Like Keith Frankish style
yeah, that
illusionism?
those that whole kind of family of views where like okay,
Because there's weak
so if you
illusionism,
take
which is sane, and then there's strong illusionism, which is the thing I think you're talking about.
yeah, I'm thinking of okay, I was going to say this more or less. So you could have a version of illusionism that says there's nothing about the phenomenal structure that you can use when you're trying to understand consciousness or
Right.
model,
Yeah.
right? And very
That
few
would be like
people,
a strong illusionism.
yes.
Yes.
I mean, does anyone hold that you know of? There's probably somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, there is.
Do you know them by name? Can we say their name? Say their
Say
their
their
name.
name if you want to, yes.
No. 'Cause that's not Frankish's view, though, right?
I mean, I would say it is.
It is Frankish's view. Oh, okay.
Well, because
It's
you
worse
mean
than I
that
thought.
from the structure of appearances, is there anything that you can get to that's like a firm, like that's a real thing?
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
Hmm. Whereas, say, Graziano is a weaker kind of illusionism.
Uh-huh.
Graziano, wouldn't you say? It's a weaker sort
Why?
of.
Because you can get that there's some informational structure or something, or like what?
Yeah, and that the role that attention plays in his model is
Uh-huh.
sort of
But not you don't get that from phenomenology or from the structure that's of appearance. You get that. And in
well,
fact, what you get is a debunking of that. So that's like a sloppy representation of and he is really an illusionist. I've had a lot of
yeah,
correspondences with him, and
okay.
I was like trying to convince him that he really has a theory of phenomenal consciousness, and he was like, "No, I don't have a theory of why you won't leave me alone about phenomenal consciousness." Basically,
Okay. Okay, so it's worse than I thought.
and
So
I was
I
like,
sort
"Oh
of
no,
thought
this is bad. This is bad." But
I
yeah, that
sort
is
of
his
thought that,
view.
to the extent that one could say it's a matter of attention, I actually don't think it is, but you might be motivated to think that it because you've paid attention
Yeah,
to your attention paying behavior or whatever you want to call it, your phenomenology. And so, oh yeah, it seems like that's important, paying attention, like that itself is kind of depending on phenomenology.
exactly. Yeah.
And so you must think you can get something about consciousness from phenomenology,
Oh,
right?
I see what you're saying because he thinks that yes, it is true that attention largely tracks what think you're experiencing. Yeah, exactly, and that you kind of do get from phenomenology.
So
So
it tells you
yeah,
something. Yeah.
and that
But
good point.
so my view is like, no, that look, we're going to settle the issue by trying to adjudicate that
Right.
either by a priori or either that or by looking at empirical.
But if one side is invoking a relation that, as far as we know, doesn't exist in nature, and the other
Yeah, but
side isn't, then like at that point we have to go, and that's what I was trying to press you on before is like this acquaintance relation is so hitherto for unknown and doesn't seem to be found in any way that neurons operate or the brain works. But it does look like you could piece together a theory of representation from that and then tell a story about how the brain represents itself as being the kind of thing you're talking about. And that's like what Graziano and like a view like mine are
yeah,
in a way similar in a sense, because that's really what we think is at the root of the issue here is that you got to tell a story that the brain can do that because
I
that's what's doing
agree.
it. It has
I,
to be done by the brain.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So how does
I
it do
mean, at
acquaintance
least
though?
I hope that that's what's going on. We could all be wrong, and it's like whatever, some wacky stuff's going on.
Yeah, yeah.
But
And I would
I'm
love it.
not
I mean,
prepared.
you know what? I still got to go to work in the morning, whether I'm in the Matrix or
Yeah, or
idealism is
what?
true or not. Like, I don't,
Yeah, true. We gotta like still gotta.
yeah, exactly. I still got to fight
Well,
ChatGPT. I
you
mean,
know,
I want to ask you about AI before we. I know I can't keep you forever, and it's fun to talk to you. But anyway, so I have a
yeah.
million things I want
Well,
to bring
but look,
up.
let me just say this is how I kind of approach this problem
Okay.
that you're raising. Like number one, I don't think it's all it's saying is it's relational. Really, when you scrape it down, all you're saying is that whatever this manifestation of the world
Uh
or
huh.
the phenomenal manifold to you
Yeah, but
in
no, you're saying
consciousness.
it's truly relational, like not
Yes, it is saying
representational.
that.
Yeah, yeah,
But
that's a lot more.
but yes, but that's not telling you anything about exactly what the nature of the relation is.
Well, it's telling you that there's nothing physically that seems to look like it behaves that way.
No.
Well, which things do? Like what's another
Well,
candidate?
I mean, really, look, all it says is it's a relation, and the relations are a dime a dozen. So it tells you
No,
very
because all
little.
those relations can be. I mean, so if this is the notion of like an internal relation that maybe you get from the because you mentioned truth makers earlier, and I know that truth
Yeah,
maker people love these kind of things.
I do think it's kind of an internal relation, but
Uh-huh. But those
uh,
are those are cheap because they don't really do anything. I mean, that's why
yeah.
they're.
So this is why I think it's not enough to say that it's just a starting point.
Uh-huh.
So it's like it's just a start. This is why you say, well, maybe I work on a model and not a theory.
Yeah.
And choose your distinction because I'm saying, okay, assume, look, I don't think you can settle any of this stuff a priori, and I'm open to the idea I could be completely wrong. But the idea is like, okay, let's take this at face value and let's build them, see where the modeling goes,
Hmm.
and see if we get anything testable out of it. And then we'll worry about how it's realized in the brain later. That's something we can't prejudge. We shouldn't try to prejudge
Uh-huh.
because even if we think we understand enough about what relations are physically, kosher, it may turn out that there are other things that are physically kosher that we didn't know that they were before.
Oh, dang, I thought you were going to say that weren't physically kosher, but still real.
I'm not saying that. It's not, so I was thinking if they're real,
But that wouldn't be bad if that were true, though, just for the record.
yeah. Well, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. But anyway,
Hey,
I would think
don't
like,
go there.
right. So it could turn out. So just think about
I
like,
see. This fits interestingly with some things I was just talking with Barbara Montero about, where she was arguing that physicalism should be kind of more of a broader view that allows that maybe there are like failures of supervenience and broadly physical properties that like emerge at different levels and all sorts of different possibilities than which we constrain ourselves to.
yes, I would agree with that. So I think we
Mm-hmm.
can't prejudge that. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing I'm kind of prejudging or taking as a assumption for now is that some kind of materialism is true,
Yeah.
and that it is the brain, and that it's not thinking all the time,
Yeah.
and that panpsychism is false, and that these kind of fundamentalist views are false. So we have
Okay.
to like, but this is just a strategy to try to model it, and then eventually see if by empirical work if you can go, okay, there's something like
But
this.
this
Realize,
is why maybe I could see like in the work of you and Uriah, when you had that book together, that maybe then there was a subsequent. I actually don't know about Uriah because
it
anyway,
seems to me that he's kind of moved in the direction of self-acquaintance models, at least,
yeah, that's
his.
why I just said I don't know. Yeah, exactly. Because I was gonna, but let's limit it to 2006 if we can, or whenever that book came out.
Yeah, I was trying to catch up with where we were, but
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Um, but there was like a tendency on his side to see like neural synchrony as important, for example, as a way of unifying states with different contents into one kind of state. And so that's if you're looking at stuff like that, you're going, oh yeah, that's not going to really be like acquaintance though, because it's like a really complicated physical state
but
involving.
I think acquaintance can be a really complicated physical state because this is why where I would disagree with somebody like Goff
Uh
or
huh.
people like that, where they think that by acquaintance, the entire nature of acquaintance. I don't think that's true.
Uh huh.
I think
So the
acquaintance
revelation
itself,
thesis and all that.
yeah, exactly. I think acquaintance itself, all you've got here is that, okay, it's relational. Something appears to, and what is the nature of that? We don't know. And it doesn't reveal, it doesn't wear its ontology on its sleeve.
Hmm.
So the fact that it doesn't seem to be this or it doesn't seem to be that doesn't allow you to infer that it's not those things, that it
Interesting.
doesn't have those hidden structures.
Yeah, but then, well, how is it not? So it sounds like, this is acquaintance. Like, what is acquaintance on your view? It just means like having a relation. So, like,
Uh,
like
It's so
suppose
there's
that you think about these the views of perception that are sometimes called direct realism or direct representationalism, or I don't know, some view whereby you have like this direct relation to the external environment, but then you also like represent it a certain way. Um,
Mhm.
and so you kind of have a combination of the two. But the direct relation isn't like playing any phenomenological role.
For direct realists.
Yeah, well, if they're representationalists.
Well, again, you could have this kind of so you're directly related to the phenomenal, basis, if you like, and then you see it as you represent it in different ways.
Uh huh. Oh, I
Yeah.
see. So,
But
okay.
but
So, yeah, this view,
he-
I mean, I don't really understand the view because, like, what kind of thing could it be that, like, is always there to be related?
so the thought
And I
would
know
be,
you can like make a mathematical structure. You can define a structure that meets that requirement. I know you can do that. I've seen you doing it. I've seen other examples. I get it. But like physically, like what kind of thing would that be?
well, I mean, at least in some of our papers, we just kind of do the computational punt, which is basically like, okay, suppose it's processing information in this kind of way that's sensitive to the projective group of transformations.
Uh-huh.
And then the higher dimension that three to three projective space requires, the fourth dimension, becomes an algebraic dimension.
Right.
And so it's not like you need the fucking, excuse me, the
Yeah,
literal
it's
fourth
it's fucking all
dimension.
right, man.
So it's not like it's not like HP Lovecraft suddenly, and we need like the fourth.
Well, but it does sort of seem like HP representation craft.
So yeah, because but then you can say, okay, so suppose that it's just somehow we don't know yet how, but realizing a projective geometry
Yeah.
in your brain is enough, and you've just like let the structure and the computational realization of the structure do all the work.
Yeah,
And
interesting.
then you don't. Then it's like, okay, if you're okay with computation. I mean, of course, there are all those problems with computational theory of mind and so on, but
I love it though. But so here, let me try this then. So let me circle back around to the theory model thing and the way I was thinking before, because one thing that the thing that I'm interested in is giving a theory of consciousness that allows us to predict and explain phenomenology in terms of brain function. So that's really the thing that I care about. I would like to know, like, in which way to tweak the dials of the brain and to produce certain phenomenological states and vice versa. And, I do view a lot of these as an open empirical questions and that we've made some progress on. So that's what I'm interested in a theory that allows us to explain that. So your kind of account doesn't seem like it's really so. For example, like higher order theories, what makes them a higher order theory on the way I think of things is that they see this kind of higher order awareness or inner awareness, an awareness of some kind of mental state, as an important explanatory part of consciousness. By which I mean, if you locate the higher order representations, then you'll find consciousness.
Mhm.
And if you tweak them in this way so that their representational content changes in that way, then consciousness will change in this predictable way and in that predictable way. So that to me looks like you're looking for an explanation because you're finding a thing which if you could tweak it like this, it changes that. And if you could predict, aha, if I do this, it'll do that.
Mhm.
And that the important thing is if it's a higher order theory, then you're just looking for inner awareness. First order theories say, well, look, inner awareness may play some role. It could be hanging around. There are people who we know, who take these kinds of views. They call it the higher, the ascending road, where there's always a kind of awareness of the conscious state, but it's not the explanatorily relevant thing. It's produced after the fact or simultaneously or somehow independently. So I do think that there's lots of like saying that there's kind of a self-awareness around and saying that's what explains consciousness. Those are independent of each other. And the higher order theories are the ones that, so for example, Dave Chalmers is friendly to a kind of self-representational view, but he doesn't have a higher order theory of consciousness. He has like a panpsychist theory of consciousness with this higher order element, or that's how I would see things. So yeah, I'm curious about like how you think about that way of divvying up the landscape.
Well, so I'll just try to think about this for a second. So when you talk about like wanting to relate it to neurological functions and areas, and maybe if you tweak this way, you get the. I mean, I agree that would give you a lot of evidence for a view.
Well, my view is that that's the only evidence that should count.
That should count.
Yeah.
I mean,
like, for example, not the transitivity principle, because it's just horribly question begging.
Yeah. So I kind of think, I see what you mean. Yeah, right. I mean, so far, what we've done is to kind of try to get two kinds of evidence. Not directly neurological evidence, even though David Rudrov's a neuroscientist, he's kind of like given up on neuroscience because he thinks it's too primitive.
It is.
And so he's kind of turned to AI modeling and computational modeling and simulations. But we did do one psychophysical experiment that does test a prediction of the PCM, which is that's the moon illusion paper. And the PCM makes a kind of weird prediction that moons, and like if you're looking at a moon illusion situation, moons on the periphery will appear more elliptical. Moons in the center. And then David devised a kind of psychophysical study of this where people have to like fill in the moon with their hand. They've got a virtual reality moon on the horizon.
Cool.
And the data looks quite promising, right? So that's not directly neurological, that's kind of psychophysical.
Yeah, that still counts though. But that would be more a prediction of the P part than the C part, one might think.
Right, because the C part,
the predictive part for instead of consciousness for people listening along that aren't.
You mean like the projective part?
Yeah, the projective part.
Yeah. Oh, right, but it is a prediction at least about visual consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if you think that it's
But like you could be like a higher order theorist or like a first order theorist or any kind of theorist and think that projective geometry has to be an important component of like the way we encounter the world or represent it.
So it doesn't distinguish between those views
exactly.
just by itself.
Yeah.
So there's sort of other premises or arguments for saying like, okay, maybe this is the deal. But so one way I think is an advantage because it means even if we're wrong about it being essential to consciousness per se, it's still a major component of conscious cognition.
Yeah, exactly.
And so the other kind of work we did is like simulational, and we can show that systems that process information and using the projective group have a whole lot of advantages over systems that process it only using the Euclidean group.
Wait, so you guys are creating conscious agents and experimenting on them?
I hope not. I mean, if panpsychism is true, it's probably really easy.
Yeah, right. Oh no.
AI
Keep taking shots at panpsychists, man. Ouch, bro.
Probably,
what did they do? No, okay. But seriously, when you simulate your view is that I think I already know the answer, so I'm asking for you to tell us a little bit more. But the view is that there's something about the first person perspective or the pre-reflective part of consciousness that can't be simulated, that you don't reproduce computationally? Or
you mean whenever we like run these simulations? Like
I just mean if you like extrapolate out to do a perfect one, could you ever produce a consciousness in an AI?
Yeah, I mean,
on your view,
maybe. Yeah.
Oh, maybe.
I mean, it also kind of depends on. Remember how early we were talking about like other components.
Uh-huh.
Like, do the like IIT and whatever they target and whatever global workspace theory targets and so on. Is it the case that like all of those have to be conjoined to then it would be like, oh, you just kind of simulated like a part of consciousness, but
Uh-huh.
for you to get to realize an AI that's conscious, you'd have to like realize all of these.
I thought your view was that maybe these would you would couldn't simulate them on the kind of like computers we have currently.
Oh, well, hell if I know, man. I
Okay.
mean, it's already like probably not because they probably require a whole lot more higher scale than but maybe in the family. I mean, like the current AIs are like you're tweaking trillions of weights and it's like
Yeah, it's getting nuts
and
out
it
there.
requires these ridiculous labor power intensive data centers and so on. Takes a year to grow one of these things or something,
Oh yeah, they're gonna
but
build them in space. Watch, the hollow moon theory is gonna turn out to be true, and it was a data center all along running the simulation, man.
but but they probably will get more efficient. And
Yeah.
then so who knows if it's just a matter of like I don't this is where I'm kind
Okay,
of
so I
like,
misunderstood your view because I guess I missed what paper was I reading? I thought you guys were arguing that just simulating the PCM wouldn't necessarily produce consciousness.
well, the simulations that we have in fact done, I
Yeah, I
don't.
see. That's probably what I was. Yeah, I was being too literal. Uh huh.
But if you at least one way of reading the theory is if it's really is the essence or the what consciousness is, then realizing a PCM agent would be to realize a consciousness, even if it's you
Okay.
just did it in a
Because this is
distributed.
different than IIT, where they want to say like if you could simulate a integrated system and it wouldn't be integrated and wouldn't have
Yeah.
conscious experience.
Yeah, I mean I guess that's a possibility too. If there are, I don't like prejudge this issue, but I'm just saying at least it's conceivable to
You
me.
have to prejudge it now before ChatGPT takes over.
Yeah, right. I mean, it could be that like you imagine you build PCM agents and they're not actually conscious, but they just seem to everybody like they are, and like
Yeah,
it's like
that would be
crap.
good. That would be not cool. Uh
Yeah,
huh.
yeah. I
Okay, so
like
yeah,
like a
interesting.
big like chat autonomous chat GPT that like zooms in on your
Yeah,
face.
exactly. Whoa. Yeah, we
I
don't
love
want
you.
that. But so this all seems very suspicious to me.
Which part? All of
The
it?
whole PCM seems very suspicious to me. Um,
Which you mean like as a theory of consciousness
well,
versus
as a theory of consciousness, yes, as opposed to because what it seems like to me, what it sounds like you're trying to do is you're saying, okay, we want to capture the like structure that if we just took, let me be crude and say the bracketing of our everyday experience, just bracket it. I don't not a Husserlian, whatever. But if you just somehow you just take this and be like, what if this is experience right now, and just take it at face value and read off what appears to be the structure of it, kind of as naively and flat-footedly as possible. Could you patch together some mathematics that would like capture that structure?
Mm,
And then it seems to me that you're suggesting the answer is yes, and here's the patchwork that would do it, and it's great. Um, but it doesn't explain consciousness in the sense that you might have wanted to at the thought of at the beginning, where you're going, oh, okay, so this is what consciousness is, and when you have this property or feature or process or whatever, then consciousness shows up and it's this way, and we know it because it's coming from that place. And you don't get like that at the end of this. You kind of just get like a mathematical structure, which is homomorphic to what you take the structure of experience to
mm,
be.
mhm.
Is that a fair way of characterizing, or do you disagree with that in any way?
So yeah, and then if for it to be a theory of consciousness, you would need to just add the line that yeah, and if you realize that structure, then you've got a consciousness. Like realize it
Well, no,
computation.
then you would add the line, which part is doing the work and in what way that allows you to predict how it changes. Because, like, for example, I'm kind of imagining you could take that whole thing and then be like, I'm a global workspace theorist. And by the way, it's being globally broadcast that's doing all the work. Or you could take your point of view and be like, no, that whole thing.
Yeah.
So you still need to explain consciousness even after you get all the structure there.
Yeah.
Don't right, and that's what's left out. It seems.
But I guess yeah. I guess one thought about it is it's kind of committed to maybe implicitly or maybe explicitly, I don't know, committed to the view that just realizing the structure is just what it is to be conscious. And if you want to explain consciousness further, you just all that's left to explain is how you realize such a structure and what it is for such a structure to be realized. And that latter part is just kind of general metaphysics.
But
like,
which part of the structure? Like there might be a part which is doing the work, so to speak. And then,
yeah, I mean,
like for example, suppose that I'm right, because that
when
would
you say
be so
doing
that
the
would be
work,
cool, and they gave us millions of dollars to find out if I'm right. So I'm gonna pretend that we did find out that I'm right about this, and that consciousness is a higher order representation, and that it's a certain kind of pattern of neural activity which you might find distributed in the prefrontal and parietal cortices under certain conditions. Let's just poof, it is thus so. Okay, then since that's the case, then the view simply predicts tweaking that state in the right way to produce the content as of seeing red means you see red. Tweaking it the other way means you don't. So now that's what consciousness is. It's a representation. We can explain its properties because when you're seeing red, you're representing yourself as seeing red. When you're seeing green, you're representing yourself as seeing green. So it lines up. When we change the states, the experiences changes. We make predictions. If we change it like that, experience will change like this. The prediction is even kind of weird. Maybe that'll happen even when the first order state's missing. Then we actually go and check. We go, oh, maybe. In fact, that was part of the way in which I would these kind of. So in other words, that would be sort of in the perfect world, no, like the theory being true, right? And then it would be that all that other stuff that you're talking about, the projective geometry, the global broadcasting, the integrated information. All of that would be important components of different parts of the story, but not of the what it's like for me component. So
yeah,
that you're objecting to that whole way of putting not just the higher order part of it, but just that way of like reality turning out.
yeah, because I'm kind of open to the idea that it could we won't be able to do that. All that we'll be able to do is go, oh, it's this structure, and of course we use like prediction and testing to get at that and so on. But oh, it's this structure. Why is that? Like, there's no. This just we have to accept it in a spirit of natural piety, as Samuel Alexander said. That's what consciousness turns out to be. We don't know what it is in that sense, either phenomenologically, and we can't get it a priori. This is that, thinking that stuff is what sends you down the path of thinking it's fundamental, like the panpsychism or dualism is true.
Yeah.
If you say, no, it's not that. We don't know, we can't rule out that it's some physically realized structure. Which is it? We have to determine it like empirically, basically. And then
and it might turn out, but still there's got to be, so what, but what is it you're saying when you say that? Because like, so one view, because at one point during when you were saying all this, I was picturing in my mind the kind of multiverse of the set world, like not the multiverse of physics, but the multiverse of set V or whatever that, I don't get all the set language, but I like this stuff. What?
The universe of sets?
Yeah.
Like the universal.
Exactly. The universe of sets, the multiverse of sets. And that one way of thinking about your view of consciousness is that in the sort of multiverse of sets, consciousness is like this one grouping of sets, this set of sets that's kind of unique and interesting and grouping these, like IIT and non-well-founded and projective geometry and these kind of, there's grouping them in that way over there. And okay, so Well, actually, I just got distracted by thinking about that. Now I forget where I was going with this. So, anyway,
I, yeah, I guess it turns on like uh, it is in a way giving up on a reductive explanation of consciousness in one sense. It is reductive in another in the sense that it's
oh,
like, oh, we can realize that structure.
right,
And we know
exactly.
how to do that.
Right. So that's what I was thinking of.
No.
That's where I was just building my little metaphor. Exactly. Thank you for reminding me. And I was thinking, okay, so here we have this cluster of things, and you're saying there's qualitative character, subjective character, and they maybe map on the different components of this. But and I'm thinking to myself, well, which one is like the one that there's something that it's like for you to to instantiate or realize?
Yeah, all of them, or whatever the
But could you
minimum.
have any part of one without the other and it still be like something for you, or do they all have to come as a package?
I mean, that's an open question, but like if they don't, if it's true that there's like one of them that if you realize that, then then of course that's what consciousness is,
Uh-huh. Then my picture
and
wins.
or whatever picture turns out, whichever
I
one of
mean, the
those.
kind of
It's like
picture
no,
that I'm
but
advocating,
if it's
which is
like
that
no,
there's
it's
an
like this big, like kind of ugly, messy structure, and you've got to realize all of that,
uh-huh.
then it would be the
And there
different.
would just be no explanation for that, why it was so
Well,
sloppy
it would
and
be the explanation would be like only the only thing left would be like, oh, we know how to build, or how do you realize that
yeah.
physically? What are the architectural constraints? What are the processing constraints? What are the, things like that?
Okay, so let me
It
try
becomes an
this.
engineering
Because
problem.
really, isn't this really just like, aren't you really now going to tell me that you're just Dennett? Is this what's happening here? Yeah.
Oh my God, I didn't know.
Yeah, because I mean, are we just like so searching for structures from the third person that we can map on? And yeah, maybe these are real patterns or something that we can find in the data or something like that. But like what? So if you can't, if all you're saying is, look, we can kind of collect together some stuff which collectively describes what we sort of say about our own experience.
Mhm.
And then also, I think it's true, so that there is that extra part you're saying there. But really, haven't you kind of arrived at a picture that's very similar in a way to this, yeah, kind of a heterophenomenology?
Oh, I hadn't ever thought of that, but because sort of think of myself as a a homo phenomenologist,
Okay.
I guess would be the would be the right phenomenon, not a hetero, but it is true. It's kind of looking for structures. It's more like Nagel's notion of objective phenomenology.
Uh-huh.
Yeah,
Interesting.
but
Yeah.
you which I just heard Andrew Lee give a nice talk
Yeah.
about
No,
that.
I like that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so you know you are extracting a structure from your first person experience, but then you're going to model it in an objective way with mathematics,
Uh-huh.
and then you're going to look at it sort of from the outside and see what that predicts about systems that have that structure. Um,
Would it be true of so suppose you got transported to zombie Earth? I call the zombie world diluted Earth because I'm so nice. And on diluted Earth, everyone thinks they're conscious, but they're not. And so that's a world where I say illusionism is true. So illusionism is the zombie world on my way of thinking of things. Now, suppose you show up there, but you're conscious. Maybe
yeah.
you're the only one in this diluted world that's conscious.
Mhm.
Um, isn't all the math still accurately predicting what these guys are doing down there?
Oh yeah. I mean that's the worry, of course, that there's
Mm-hmm.
this secret component that the math and structure is leaving out,
Uh huh.
and you know that the pan proto psychus exists on this world, but it doesn't exist on that world, and you know. So I guess I
But
mean,
what I'm trying to ask is, isn't everything you're saying couldn't it be said by an illusionist?
like, yeah, it could be, but if you think that, so I guess like the secret metaphysics here, um, that you're making me divulge, is a kind of like structuralism,
Uh-huh.
whereby I think like consciousness is really just is the concrete realization. The consciousness, as you know and love it, just is the concrete realization of a certain kind of organization or structure.
Uh-huh.
Um, that's what it is. So if we go to, diluted Earth and you really realize that structure, then on that view, like that world's not actually conceivable, if you think conceivability entails possibility,
Mm-hmm.
which I don't, but that world's not metaphysically possible, right?
Right, because you're sort of so we gotta distinguish two things. One is like on if the so you're trying to say the zombie world is impossible, or at least maybe conceivable if you like that way, but not possible or something like that.
Yeah.
Um, but so I like that.
If
But
structuralism is true, if this kind of metaphysics is correct, then it's
right, if
not.
this structuralism is true, but it's more than just a structuralism though, because it's a structuralism with the highly, the given, the
Yeah,
qualities, the
but the claim is
points,
that
the things which are mysteriously self-related to each other,
the claim is that at
that
the end of the
that's the
day,
stuff that's we're trying to figure out what the heck you're
yeah,
talking about, you
but the
know.
claim it's at the end of the day,
So that's not structuralism though.
those are all just structures. Yeah, that's the claim. So
Okay.
qualities, even though they seem to be in a certain sense non-structural at some level, like hues and tones and pure tones, seem to be non-structural, but in fact they are.
Uh-huh.
That's actually my view about sensory qualities. Their apparent simplicity is just apparent.
Okay. And so
But
that's not a quality space view?
I guess I'm kind of like neutral about. I mean, I do think there is, in some abstract sense, there is a space of possible qualities. But
And they
I think
define a mathematical structure. I mean, the
they
simplest, I mean,
do.
red is
Yeah,
more similar to orange than the green, just base, I mean, you can map that stuff
that's
out.
yes. But I think they have a lot of hidden structure too.
Hmm.
So that what we pick out when we relate them, like this is darker than that, and this, all those relations we can pick out. That's kind of superficial. It is grounded in like their real nature, but it's kind of like looking at the surface of a actually much higher dimensional kind of thing. And I also think like the quality space. So our kind of quality space map. Are you thinking of like Austin Clark and things like that,
Yeah,
or
but also Andrew Lee, since you mentioned him earlier, but he's done some
yeah,
work on
right,
this.
right. So I kind of think that our what we map out when we kind of map out a quality space using, whatever, you can use some psychophysical means too, like just noticeable differences and all that,
Right.
that it's still kind of superficial when it comes to the understructure of qualities. I certainly,
Understructure. What are these mysterious things that you're talking about?
well, like, okay, hues, like red or whatever, the
Yeah.
reddish, that it seems like, oh, it's just red, and of course, it only you to know it, you have to be acquainted with it, and blah blah blah. But what is that? As Leibniz would say, it's a confused idea.
Uh-huh.
And what he meant was that it conceals a whole lot of structure that isn't apparent. So I actually think you can be a structuralist about
What is the
quality.
non-apparent structure?
Well, that's what we're not going to get by just mapping out the apparent structure.
I get that.
And we need like a deeper theory of it. And we
Uh-huh.
also need a theory that like explains why quality space divides into different what I'm sorry to quote him again, but what Husserl called hyletic fields.
Why would you do that?
What he meant was that like this, tactile qualities and olfactory qualities and auditory and visual, they seem to be like, heterogeneous in a way. Like not they're in different categories. They're all qualities, but they like, you have like the visual spectrum and then the auditory spectrum, and these are like they have their own kind of quality spaces, but like look at it bigger, they branch
Yeah.
out into
There's a
these heterogeneous. How do we account for that? So that already shows us there's like something hidden and deeper about it than just like the surface relations we can notice. That's interesting.
So you can't just get to, well, so, I mean, we're getting well on the time here, but
Oh
I don't
yeah.
know what your life is like. So if you have to go, you let me know, but I'm good for a little bit longer if
Like
you are.
maybe I don't know, 15 more minutes max. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Batteries are powering out. I've been sick too, by the way. So have been fighting
Mm.
this cold. I saw a meme that was hilarious. It was said, only a woman who's had childbirth without any pain medication truly understands the pain a man feels when he has the cold. And I was like, yes, it is truly miserable. But yes, I've had a cold for like the last, well, it's been like 5 days, and it's just like killing me.
Yeah.
But actually, this is a non sequitur. But yesterday I took Mucinex. This, like, it has
Hmm.
dextromethorphan in it, which I haven't had in years since I was young. It's
Guaifenesin,
like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like the hard stuff basically. It's got yeah. Anyway, so I felt very strange yesterday, and
Did you robo trip?
yeah, I did in Robo Trip, but I remember the good old days exactly. But Robo tripping, yeah,
Yeah, the
from the old
dextromethorphan.
school. Put that tussin on it. But yeah, anyway, half those drugs are illegal now. Epinephrine and all those things.
Um,
Yeah,
oh, pseudoephedrine is, yeah, right,
yeah, they
right.
took it off the market exactly, but that used to
Oh,
be
that
in
you
there.
have to get permission to get it.
Oh, is
Yeah,
that okay?
you
I
have
did.
to,
Hey,
you have to like, if pseudoephedrine, you have to give your license, and they monitor how much you buy
oh
because
wow.
you can make meth out of it.
Yeah, exactly. It used to be over the counter. Well, I have asthma, so I used to have to take it a lot, but it,
Yeah.
it, it did have those other things. Anyway, okay. So, um, uh,
But you shouldn't make meth, kids, if people are wondering.
oh, really?
Oh,
You think
I'm gonna
so?
get.
Thank you for that wise piece of advice. Study consciousness. Don't make math, guys. Endorsement. Yes, I agree. Although Breaking Bad was a great fictional dramatization of someone who might have chosen that path.
That, yeah, that's true. It's anti-heroic, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, but anyway, so back to this kind of idea about the multiverse of the sets and the collection of
Mm.
the different things and how they relate to. So, what your idea that maybe you need to have all of those things
And maybe, yeah.
in order to have what we call phenomenal consciousness. But then how you want to resist this leading to some kind of panpsychism, where panpsychism is, not necessarily the view that the table is conscious, but the view that the
Right.
fundamental elements of it are conscious. And this kind of a acquaintance relation does kind of look like something that, I mean, Michael Ty has endorsed this kind of idea recently that
Yeah, I
that's
know.
the
That was a surprise, wasn't
I mean, I think it's like the kind of inevitable result of thinking in this direction. So I'm just waiting for your, surprise announcement.
it? That I've become
Because
yeah.
I just don't see, like, yeah,
But
what that
no.
what it is that you could appeal to that's gonna do that. And then also,
Well,
but even before we get sucked into that, is it physical or not? But like, how does it explain consciousness
mhm.
to say that it involves kind of self awareness? It may capture an aspect of the phenomenology, I agree, but it doesn't look like it explains anything. It looks like it
Well,
calls
that's
out for
because
explanation, which is really what your work is aiming to try to do. So it's the reversing it in the direction you would want a theory to go.
see, for a long time I've kind of thought, look, I mean, what would it be to explain consciousness?
Yes.
Um, And I've thought it has to be a matter of identifying it first, like characterizing it accurately first, and then showing that, okay, we've got it, right, empirically, and then just explaining how that is realized. So then it just becomes like an engineering problem.
Hmm.
Um, and then that's all we can do in terms of like giving an explanation where we go, oh, that was conceptual. That was a conceptually satisfying resolution of the hard problem. I'm kind of like, no, we're not going to be able to do that.
Hmm.
Why? Because we have this gap between the phenomenology of consciousness and its ontology, including its sort of real, if that's what it is, its real material ontology.
Hmm.
We can't get it from phenomenology, and the emptiness, the fact that phenomenology only gives us like the surface, if you like, and doesn't give us the metaphysics of consciousness, leaves it open Like, and it also means that anything we say about it is in a certain way going to seem like it's just so. Even if you go, oh, so it must be fundamental, you are also saying it is just so.
Just exactly so.
Yeah. Right. You're saying it turns out that,
Yeah.
right? So if we say, well, like it turns out that consciousness is the realization of this whatever structure C, whatever it includes, right? How do we know that? Well, because I suppose, right? Every for every conscious agent we've studied, like we found this structure and we've done a jillion tests that confirm it and so on.
Mhm.
Then we're all going to go, yeah, that's what it is. Eventually, our children will not, our grandchildren will not have this problem. They'll be like, yeah, they've figured out what consciousness is. And then the fact that there's a kind of like, yeah, but I could think of it being something else
Right.
because from the based on the phenomenon, the emptiness of the phenomenology.
But yeah, I agree. But still, there is a kind of pull towards the idea, I would say, that you want some to explain the features that it has and not just model them, but explain
Yeah,
how they show up and like how they are related to each
yeah, I
other.
know,
And what
I
you're
agree,
saying
but
is they might not have any explanation or relation to each other. They might just be different mathematical techniques that get patched together.
I'm saying that's possible.
Yeah.
But then I think it's going to be so. This is why I kind of think modeling is important first, because modeling allows you to make predictions based on the model, and that which can, ideally lead to testing.
Hmm.
And mathematics kind of can drive that. That's why I kind of like all this mathematics of consciousness stuff.
Yeah.
But so that the model could eventually lead to what you're calling a theory.
Right,
But the
but
sort
so
of the
one thing you might think is that that's a good way to do physics maybe, but the studying the brain, like you start like by looking at the brain, and then you have some theories and you have some data, and they go back and forth and so forth. But you don't just start with like taking some realm as set, like you start with phenomenology and go, this is the structure. Um, so, in fact,
yeah.
you would want to go, huh, this is the way things appear. Are they really that way? And then many people would say, well, things seem very different from that point of view. Like maybe consciousness isn't as unified as it seems. Maybe, all
Yeah.
of these things that you
But
were
look,
talking about
even if
can
you
come
say
up.
that, even if you say that, you still have to come up with an explanation for why it seems like that,
Exactly.
which is then sort of tantamount to a theory, a model or theory of consciousness
But then
anyway.
it seems like representation is in the job of like accounting for that because you could say it seems that way too because you represent it that way and there's a connection between seeming and representing that's intelligible. Whereas what you're saying is it just is that way and we just have to deal with it.
Yeah, I guess, but I think of it more like, we're kind of like building competing models so it's
Yeah,
not
and
like
so do you agree though that empirical work can decide between these competing models?
yeah, I would agree in principle, yeah.
Okay. Because, like, for example, on a view like mine, I would say, well, you could have the kind of pure awareness state because maybe you just have a higher representation that just says there is experiencing,
Mhm.
but doesn't specify what it's of or who's doing it.
Mhm.
So that what results is just a kind of pure experience without content and without being associated with a self. And that's kind of, and your kind of view seems like you would predict that that's not the case. Now, I'm not saying it really is the case that there's no self there. I'm saying that
Yeah, I think
there's a
so.
representation with the content that says there's no self, and that would go along with the experience. And it would make sense of like depersonalization and all sorts of things, which do seem to suggest that maybe this comes anyway. So those are the kind of empirical predictions that I would look for. But it sounds like you would want to explain those away rather than take
Well,
them as
look,
evidence because you're already committed to this phenomenological
as,
feature having to be the case.
as you know, in all of these kinds of debates, people have ways of either accommodating what you're talking about or if, when they have to explain it away. And everybody does that. That's
Hmm.
like just part of, and we're not really at the normal science phase of the science of consciousness, but we're
We
still
could
doing
call
the
it
same.
normal.
We're still kind of doing that. So to a certain level, I don't have a problem with, okay, some things you have to accommodate,
Hmm.
like adding an epicycle or whatever. It's just a matter of degree, but the kinds of predictions I think are more that are going to be like more um, you know decisive are going to be more like psycho things that we do by psychophysics
Hmm.
and things. In other words, we have like a body of data. Like, okay, people say a lot of things about their experience. Can you accommodate it? Yeah, I can accommodate. Well, you might. It doesn't look like it, so you might have to. Like one thing we get a lot is like, well, but yeah, the visual experience seems projective, but nothing else does. Like auditory experience, and so,
Yeah.
and then we say something about the fact that actually it was Russell, believe it or not, Bertrand Russell in his book on geometry, who argued that he wasn't just talking about visual experience.
Hmm.
He was saying the phenomenal manifold has to be projective because that's the only geometry that gives you the notion of externality at
Yeah.
all.
Interesting. That's a good point. Something in front of you, right?
We say something that's kind of Russell's forgotten book about geometry from 1899.
He had a lot of good ideas because he changed his mind so much and he was smart. So he's always
Yeah,
exploring different ideas.
that's right. So we kind of say something like that,
Hmm.
like and the fact that your visual experience is normally integrated with your bodily experience and your auditory experience
Right.
and yet we can allow for a lot of weird phenomena. Like my favorite is halotoscopy.
Hmm.
This phenomenon where
Yeah.
people,
Where you don't
like,
know which one you are in the
yeah,
mirror or something like
yeah, we
that.
can we can actually kind of make sense of that,
Uh huh.
where you have an ambiguous point of view.
So this is where someone's standing in front of the mirror. They're or like me right now. I'm looking at the myself on the screen as I'm sitting here, and they go, "Oh, I see myself on the screen, but I don't know if I'm this one that's looking there or that one that's looking here." And that
Yeah,
seems like almost like impossible to make that
any
someone could
sense?
really have that experience.
I know, yeah, but we can make some sense of it with this
Hmm.
reciprocity feature of projective space. But okay, uh, so there are a lot of things like that where we go, oh, we can make sense of it. And every theory of consciousness has some degree of those things. Like, oh,
Right.
we can, and then sometimes they try to accommodate things that it doesn't work. Like IIT tries to make sense of visual space, but it pretty much fails because it doesn't get a projective geometry out
Hmm.
of its efforts, and it doesn't really have
Burn.
resources to get a projective geometry out of it.
Yeah, I think the projective geometry point is really important, and I like it. I think you and Farid Monsieur, I think he's another guy who's talked about not in the same way as you, but talked about projective geometry being
Yeah, I
important.
think so. Yeah.
And I wish more people talked about that stuff because I think it is I think got to be an important part of the story. So I agree with you about that. But I was more pushing on the like the self awareness part and whether it's acquaintance or whether it's representational. Because, like, for example, I agree that I have a phenomenology of being acquainted with the self, but I think that's a result of it being represented that way. That there's a
Yeah.
saying, you have acquaintance with yourself, so it seems that way to me.
But you
But
think that that particular representation is really relational, right?
no,
You don't. Okay. All right.
no. I mean, well, I don't know what that means. I've been trying to ask you for like 3 hours, I think, and I still don't quite.
Okay. Well, here's one way to spell it out. Like, can you quantify into it? So, if Billy believes that that's Santa Claus, I can't be like, there is an X that, I can't quantify into that context,
Uh-huh.
that intentional context. Can you, in a acquaintance context, if it's a real relation, you can quantify in, right? This is where you remember the old, what they accused sense datum theorists of holding the sense datum fallacy.
Yeah, we love to call it a fallacy when we don't agree with
That's right.
it.
It's the
Yeah,
fallacy, right?
exactly.
So
See, you don't agree with it, so it's a fallacy.
yeah, right. So they're basically saying, oh, you can't quantify in. You can't go like from the fact that an orange after image appears to me, I can't conclude there is something orange
Right,
but the acquaintance theorist goes, oh yes, you can. There is something
right.
that you relate to in this way. Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
but
okay.
but no, but what is that? What is it? What does that mean? The self isn't
Well,
that thing, that's for sure.
What is it is like a further question, and you might hold that
Well,
we
to
can't.
know that it's there, you would say if you're directly acquainted with it, then you would know a lot about it, let's say.
Well, you would know. Yeah, you would know it's. This goes back to our discussion of qualia. Like, oh yeah, it's like it's reddish.
Yeah,
It's
but
red. But then if you think, yeah, but the acquaintance doesn't tell you the whole essence of it, so it means it has all kinds of like hidden properties that acquaintance is not giving you. And that those will have to be
it's like
determined
a
in
shell
some
game, man. It's a con job. It's
way.
just,
What a,
I mean, not really, but yeah, I get the feeling that every time I'm like, no, wait a minute. You're like, wait, no, it's over there. And I'm like, wait a minute. You're like,
yeah,
wait,
but
no,
that's
it's over
that's I think
there.
it's because like maybe sometimes you're thinking that an acquaintance theorist would have to be committed to revelation about acquaintance itself and about the objects of
No,
acquaintance.
I'm thinking, what is acquaintance if not something that's committed to that?
Then that's the other component of it. It's just the phenomenological part. You mean like, oh yeah, like stuff appears to me. Yeah. And you're just talking phenomenology then. Yeah. In theory, could all of that be accounted for by like a priori, not prejudging? Could that be accounted by some representational story? Maybe if at some level you've got a real relation there,
What is this real relation stuff coming back all of a
that
sudden?
there's some
So
that
look, you first of all, you're against externalism. You hate causal theories. You don't like teleology, but you're insisting on this real relation. Like what unholy mix of what in the narf is going on here is happening?
well, this is a
The
good question.
relations are to the external stuff. Those are the real relations. The real relations are the ones that you can be wrongly related to. That those are the
Oh,
real ones. Like what is this other thing that you keep in calling the
yeah,
real
so I
relation?
guess you could say I think that consciousness has like episodes of consciousness bear an internal relation to their phenomenal manifold.
Uh-huh.
But I
But
don't
what does
know
that
what,
mean?
well, okay, there's the phenomenological meaning of it, which you can kind of go, okay, I kind
Yeah,
of
I
see
could
what you
get
mean.
that. Yeah.
And then there's the ontology of it, which we don't know,
Oh.
which we try to make a model of,
Uh-huh.
and we try to, get at it that way by making models based on that sort of assumption.
But so if you have
Then,
like if you have the projective model or the non-well-founded set model or whatever, they don't like yeah, they don't get at the thing we're trying to explain. They get at a structure.
yeah.
Uh,
Yes, this is why I think like it's a good chance that that's just a structure of consciousness, and that there are other structures that have to be
yeah.
incorporated.
Well, okay. I know what I got. You said 15 more minutes. I'm already pushing my luck. But let me try one last thing. So, like,
Okay.
if really consciousness just is this kind of structure, then there's got to be a solution to the hard problem because
Well,
science explains structures and functions. It's premise one of the argument. Premise two, consciousness is not a matter of structure and function.
yeah. Well, this
Wrong, you say. False. Uh-uh. So
false
therefore,
on.
science must be able to explain the structure and the function that explain, um, right?
Yeah.
So you
So I
should
guess
be able to solve the hard problem
I
according
guess
to.
like, the reason I put it that way before is like I'm thinking, but some advocate of hard problem thinking will be like, yeah, but why that structure?
But
Why
shouldn't you
that?
be able to deduce it if it's the right one?
Oh,
Shouldn't you
so that's
know it?
that's
Shouldn't you
what was it
know
called?
it?
Type C materialism or something?
Yeah.
Isn't
I
that,
mean,
yeah.
but
Um,
no. What I'm
yeah,
well,
maybe.
but if you
Well,
if you
maybe
so
we
what I'm
can.
saying is if you really are saying it's a kind of structure is what
Yeah.
it is. And the
Yes.
whole Chalmers argument is kind of aimed at no, it's not a structure.
Right. Yeah.
Because if it were a structure, then you could solve the hard problem. And you're
I
saying
see.
it is a structure, but you can't solve the hard problem. That's
Well, that's
that's what I'm
because
trying to figure out.
yeah, it's because I'm thinking of the hard problem as involved. If you think that you by a posteriori identification of something with
Hmm.
consciousness, that doesn't solve the hard problem because it leaves this kind of the a posteriori
I
part.
see.
Like
Now it's making sense.
then you might say, well, that isn't, you just like are saying that that's what consciousness is, but you haven't said like why, or
Yeah,
you haven't deduced it from some more basic principles.
exactly. So that's what I think that
But
people who like the transitivity principle and those kinds of things. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to say that this kind of
Mm.
stuff about awareness, and it serves as like a kind of deductive link that allows us to like know what states in the brain are going to be the ones we want to look at, and then also be able to then explain in this grander scheme that fully, if we understood it, that the kind of block. So yeah, I think that this is so you are kind of like type B,
I'm
a
sort of like
type B set
method.
theorist, physicalist type, a non-standard type B type thing.
Yeah, where type B is kind of like a posteriori
Identity,
identity.
yeah.
But I kind of like to say, yeah, it's a posteriori structural identity theory,
Okay.
and or it may be computational, and um, God can be a type C. For
Oh,
God, maybe it follows from some more fundamental principles
okay.
that that go beyond what we
Uh-huh. Well,
understand.
type C I thought was usually like you're either going to be type A or type B, but you're kind of neutral right now.
I thought type C was we have to go back and reread that,
Yeah, it's
right?
been so long since the 90s. I'm so glad we don't have this type of type A, B, C diabetes anymore.
Oh, but I think it's I thought it was like to be able to deduce it a priori.
That's type A.
You sure?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then what was type C?
Type
And
C is the one who says it may seem like there's a hard problem right now, but in the future, we'll either be able to deduce it a priori or we'll be
oh,
able to a posteriori identify it. So either A or
okay.
B will be true in the future, or
Well,
we'll know
okay,
which one.
maybe I should have said that God can be a type A.
Yeah. Okay. So
Okay.
God. So yeah. So it's an ideal knower would be able to deduce or something like that. But what you're saying is that's not really important for your view.
Yeah, because yeah, we're kind of stuck in this,
Yeah.
and part of it comes from the person who does, I think, rightly get at the role that revelation or completeness is playing in intuitions like this is Goff, because Goff basically says, yeah, the whole
The whole thing is
consciousness.
built on that.
Yep. And
Yeah,
if
he's
you
very
if
clear about that. And then when you
yep.
really press him on that, he doesn't really have much to say. He's just like, well, then rationalism wouldn't be true. But I like rationalism, I guess. Like,
It's like
cool, dude. Must be nice to like have the universe conform to your likes. But yeah, it is it rational. I mean, I also am friendly to on certain days, friendly to kind of a priori knowledge, rationalist based stuff because it's hard to
too.
make sense of a lot of math and the way we think about things without taking some of that stuff seriously. But I'm enough of a skeptic about the a priori to be like, oh, you can't just like say however the world has to be for that to be true has got to be going on. It's very mysterious that people are so willing to take that stuff so seriously, I would say.
But it's also like, why would you apply it, whatever you think about mathematical knowledge, like, why would you apply that to something that's clearly a concrete, real process like consciousness? Like, why would you? It's sort of like
I
it's
mean, well, you agree with the Goffs of
kind
the
of
world, at
medieval.
least to the point where consciousness is like it's private, subjective, accessible from your first person point of view, but not from mine, and that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, but like
So
almost
that's
everybody.
so that's I guess why because this is something that we know we're acquainted with, which at least gives us the impression of like some serious kind of knowledge with that's directly something that's directly
Yeah,
right there that we're really related to, as you put it.
this is, so I accept like the infallibility component under certain qualifications. Like if it seems to be a certain way, it is.
Mm-hmm.
Goff and other people who accept revelation think, no, if it is that way, it seems to be that way.
Right, that's the
Those are
stronger
two different
claim.
conditionals,
Uh huh.
and people have conflated them for like a long time. Some people have been very clear about the difference, but
I don't know.
most
I
people,
actually, it's funny because one of my, I think it was like the third or fourth conversation I had on this podcast was with Goff. And I was trying to press him on sort of, I think, this point. I was saying, well, like in experience, what's revealed is like the experiential component, and you may know directly about that and be acquainted with it, but there may be a physical component that you're not like directly knowing about, even though you're acquainted with the property, which that really is in some sense.
yeah.
And he just thinks that that's like a non-starter kind of view for reasons that like aren't very clear, I would say. But yeah,
No, but I think what's going on there is kind of conflating implicitly. It's either like you just accept completeness, like you have complete access to all of its essential properties, right? And its intrinsic properties.
hmm
or you're kind of conflating a de re with a de dicto kind of,
Right. And we were
you know,
talking about that earlier. Exactly.
like, so you're okay, you're directly acquainted with this object. Uh, this object turns out to be picked out by some description that's not obvious to you from the, you know,
The point of view you have on
yeah,
it.
that's happens all the time. I mean, I'm like, this might be my great grandmother's favorite color, and to tell that, but like, and then they don't like the idea that it could be some essential description that picks it out,
Uh-huh.
embedded in a theory that actually,
And so, why don't you take a priori arguments more seriously in this realm, Ken? I am wondering, given your emphasis on math and how mathematically oriented you are in a lot of your work.
oh, yeah.
That,
Um, well, I just think they're inconclusive. And I
uh-huh.
think
But
if
do
you,
you find like zombies conceivable?
but relative to I have like a Thomas Reed notion of conception
Oh
where like
crap. Okay.
contradictory things are conceivable.
Okay.
So
Uh-huh.
yeah, they're
Yeah, yeah.
conceivable.
No, I like impossible worlds and contradictory worlds as well. I think that those are conceivable in some sense
They're
too.
conceivable. So are they, but, and then all the whole thing about ideal, prima facie and secunda facie conceivability and ideal you just beg the question with all that
Well, then
stuff.
you could just skip it and say, could our world have been such that physically it was just like this, but no consciousness? You have to say no to that, right?
Yeah, you have
Yeah.
to say no to that.
Uh-huh.
Our world, yeah.
Yeah.
Any world, well, but then it's like, uh, it's a standard sort of like, well, if you say this, then like if consciousness is this physical, then no, and if it's not, then it's like it doesn't go. Those are a priori arguments. Don't get they're playing with concepts, as
Uh-huh.
Kant said. Like it's not you're not
But
getting
but I
any.
mean, so
Then
if you
you
really
could build
think that
in.
you're right though, that you've identified some structure, which
Mm,
is like, let's take your view as serious as we can. So you've identified the set of structures, the set of sets, which importantly need to be co-instantiated in order for consciousness to be around. Um, and you say we shouldn't worry about like what in the brain is doing that. We should get the structure right and then do some experiments, see if we're right, and then could we not be led to the view that this is not a physical component of the world? And wouldn't you be led to that view by sort of conceivability constraints at that point? Because what else would do it? I mean, it's a possibility, right? Or is this not?
I mean, I don't. Yeah, I don't want to rule out magic. Maybe the
Okay.
world,
Uh-huh. I guess
maybe
I'm.
it's magical at some point, but
Yeah.
I think like the working hypothesis is that it's
But how is it more magic than your physicalist view?
mm,
I mean,
how
isn't
it's
it magic on some side at some point?
well, I don't
Because
know.
my view has always been that like at least physicalism is just as magical as their view. So like if you can't just dismiss it
Oh,
out of hand. It's like
yeah, I
it's
kind
just
of
as
agree with
crazy
you
as the
there.
other views, right? It has to be
Yeah,
taken
I
just as
agree.
seriously.
There's no like gain in the reduction of lunacy by going panpsychist or dualist or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, they're equally insane. But physicalism is one of is you have to like there is a kind of I mean the meta problem, do you take that seriously or do you not? That there is like a kind of instinctual like, huh, what are you talking about?
Yeah, but
That you have to overcome in
you
some
know,
sense to make sense of the physicalist theories.
yes, but I think it applies to non-physicalist theories too.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Because I think phenomenology is just empty when it comes to the metaphysics of consciousness.
But do you really think like if you're a panpsychist, I hate to keep I know people are accusing us of I don't
Of
know what they're accusing us of, but
nothing political, right?
yeah,
Like,
no, being stoners, I guess, talking about consciousness too much, which I don't see how they're quite related. But anyway, so do you really think that there's no link or that conceptually between like saying, okay, there's the field, the hilo, whatever crazy thing you call it, the field out there has these qualities of whatever. And well, when we think about pixels on a screen, paint on a canvas, we can decompose it to elements.
yeah.
Maybe the elements are simpler colors, and maybe we can tell a story about how they combine. And then you go, okay. But on the other hand, the physicalist is saying there's these things that don't have colors, that don't have any of these properties really at all or something, but then somehow this other thing. So isn't there, I mean, the less level of surprise on the panpsychist view, because it's like you can
Oh
tell a
yeah.
very naive story about color mixing. It makes
Yeah.
sense. Like,
Yeah.
but what naive common sense story can you tell besides like water and H2O and stuff for the physicalist side? So it does seem like that's a difference.
Yeah, I agree. Like
Oh,
there's
okay.
something kind of in that sense intuitive about dualist and panpsychist sort of views.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So
That
and so then you do have the
that's
meta problem is
lost
like,
on the,
well, why is consciousness appear like that to us if it's not really that way?
yeah. Well, I mean,
Something that looks like it resists regular explanation in physicalist terms, but could be explained in terms of like, qualities or phenomenal properties or something.
yeah. I mean, if you think of it as kind of from a functional point of view, that consciousness, what it really needs to enable you to do is to deal with the world
Mm-hmm.
primarily, and it's only kind of secondarily about dealing with itself, even though it needs to be aware of itself for, self-location and other things, but that it's not about its own metaphysics.
Mm-hmm.
And that the phenomenal surface, if you like, or the hyletic field, the articulated hyletic fields,
You're reading too much
um,
Husserl.
that's yeah, that's all about that surface, and that it's that surface, that kind of user interface,
Mm-hmm.
that it's really our kind of user interface, and so that it's transparent in Metzinger's sense, like you see right through it to the world that you deal with, and you only occasionally does it clue into you that, oh, it's this surface, like when you have a hallucination or a misperception or whatever.
Yeah.
um, then that kind of makes sense that all of its nature would be hidden from it, and you would just end up with a kind of empty experience, like it's empty, and that it would be kind of, Churchland has a whole story about this too, about the need for kind of like phenomenal primitives for
Huh. I
that are
mean,
not taken
yeah, I
onto the
know. I think I have
ontological.
that paper or a version of that paper. He talks about that in the book that because he presented at the online consciousness conference. This
Yeah,
stuff. So, but
yeah.
yeah, but it just seems like you're gonna. Yeah. Anyway, we're gonna go around all back to the beginning in our strange loop self-representational cycle here because I'm just gonna ask you. Wait, like this is just representational. You don't want to call it that because yeah. I think I have come to understand your view more today. So I appreciate this conversation. And even though I still am, I'm not against it or anything. I still have questions. So I'll have to ask you back someday to talk about this. And I would, because I didn't really even get to talk about the predictions, which I really wanted to bring up, and the kind of empirical work that would push the results one way or the other. So someday, if you're bored enough, I'll have you back on. But as a final, like, hurrah, I always like to ask at the end if there was anything which you wanted to have come up or thought might come up, which didn't. And by now, the answer can be no. And I know, you have that interesting stuff about animals and suffering and how to make sense
Oh,
of it from that perspective. But we don't have to talk about. But I'm just curious. Was there anything that you were like, oh, I was gonna, bring that up?
no, really. I mean, I didn't know exactly what we would cover. And in fact, you said you kind of understand my view a little better now, but I think I understand my own view a little better after being. I mean, this was good for me,
Cool.
honestly.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
No, yeah, this is what I'm
It
here
challenged
for.
me to rethink things because you know how it goes. Like you kind of get set in your ways after you work through something, and then you kind of stop developing about it, and you go, okay, that's settled. But then it's good to be like, no, that's not really settled.
Yeah.
Revisit it.
And
So I
these issues are so fundamental too, and it's good to have fellow travelers that are thinking about this as deeply, but from different perspectives. And so that's what I've
yeah.
always appreciated. I mean, I've known you for a long time, and we were just remarking like how long it's been since we've seen each other. But still, I've known you for a while, and I've always appreciated your work. And sometimes I
Right.
remember having the feeling of reading your work and just feeling like this stuff is very strange, and in a good way though, like in a challenging, like you have to really like think from a different point of view to make sense of what they're arguing for. And I don't mean that like in a bad way. I mean, that's what I value in philosophy is when you encounter something that makes you go, like you just said, outside of your normal brain roots and go, wait a minute, no, I need to put some tracks over here because I haven't seen it from that side of things yet. So I really did appreciate and value your work for that. So
Thank you.
I just wanted you to know that's critical, or as much as I'm saying I don't understand it, it's from a deep actual trying to engage with the work that I value.
Oh, thank you so much. That's like evident from our discussion. So this is good to talk to you again. It's been a long time, and I always remember having good back and forth with you.
Yeah, well, that's memory works in my favor because you forget the bad things. Anyway, just hang on for 1 second. I'll say bye off the air. But in the
Okay.
meantime, it's been great catching up with you, and this has been a wonderful
Yeah. Thank you.
conversation. All right, we are clear.